In 1969, NASA stood at the peak of human achievement with Apollo 11. Fast forward to today, and we face a moment that could mirror the opposite, the deepest downsizing since the Apollo era. Missions already built could be dismantled, entire scientific fields could lose their backbone of data, and thousands of people may be told to go home. Why? Because of a looming budget deadline and one overlooked policy fix. This story isn't about the past, it's about the fragile present of America's space program. But before we move on, I would like to ask you for a quick favor. We are just starting out, so your support means the world to us. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and now let's dive right into the uncovering of our today's episode. What if satellites already orbiting Earth, built at the cost of billions, could be switched off overnight as if closing a laptop? The idea seems unthinkable, but it is exactly the kind of scenario now hanging over NASA. The problem sits in the way the agency is funded. Congress rarely passes a full-year budget on time, so NASA, like many federal agencies, runs on temporary measures called continuing resolutions. These resolutions extend past funding into the next year so that projects continue without disruption. Without one in place after September, NASA programs are left sitting on the edge of a cliff. That uncertainty became sharper when the Office of Management and Budget sent a memo instructing every federal agency to begin preparing for staff reductions starting October 1st. In practice, that means teams who operate spacecraft, telescopes, and research labs must draft shutdown plans just in case the money falters. Imagine a fully operational satellite sending back live images of Earth's climate. Yet managers unplugging it not because it failed, but because no funds are authorized to keep data flowing. The same labs where engineers troubleshoot spacecraft may have locked doors, with employees barred from entering, even though both the buildings and equipment remain in working order. The standoff comes from a political tug-of-war. The administration is asking to shrink agency budgets, shifting priorities toward narrow goals, while Congress must decide whether to include protective language in a continuing resolution. Without that special language, the cuts take effect by default, and programs already running suddenly lack legal authority to spend. The technical difference on paper translates, in real life, into people being told to halt decades of research. Government shutdowns have hurt science before, but usually they only cause temporary delays, a few weeks of missed observations or postponed rocket tests. What looms now is beyond any of those interruptions. This time, entire missions could be mothballed not for weeks, but for good. Communities around NASA field centers know what that means. Thousands of employees could find themselves unemployed in cities that depend on those jobs, from Houston to Huntsville. Every paycheck lost ripples outward to local shops, landlords, and schools. All of it comes down to money disappearing with unusual speed. The proposed budget for fiscal year 2026 would carve away roughly 1/4 of NASA's funding. On the scale of the agency, that equals billions of dollars disappearing in a single year. The figure is not just large, it is mission-changing. Faced with a shortfall that deep, NASA must choose what programs survive and which are abandoned midstream. And that leads to the next question. If resources vanish this fast, who gets saved? Robots probing the solar system, or human missions aimed at Mars? Why does Mars keep getting more money while almost every other branch of space science faces cuts nearly in half? That is the strange reality of NASA's new budget plan. Human exploration and missions tied to Mars have been singled out for growth, while the programs that watch our planet, study the stars, and explore the wider solar system are being pushed aside. Under the proposed plan for 2026, funding for Mars rises by hundreds of millions, even as science programs lose nearly half their support. The numbers show a 47% decrease for science, paired with about $650 million extra dollars for Mars exploration. The imbalance becomes clearer when you look at the real projects on the line. Take the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope, which has already gone through years of complex design and assembly. It is now almost ready for launch with hardware built and tested, yet the telescope could be stopped in its tracks because there is no money left to carry it across the finish line. That kind of cancellation does not just waste instruments, it leaves behind years of investment by workers, engineers, and scientists who stood on the edge of a breakthrough mission. The same kind of uncertainty hangs over programs that have been woven into the fabric of US science for decades. The Landsat program has provided continuous images of Earth's surface for more than 50 years, shaping everything from farming forecasts to disaster response. Suddenly, all that history could end, not because the technology failed, but because resources were redirected elsewhere. Without Landsat, the most consistent record of Earth's changes disappears, and with it, the ability to track the health of forests, crops, and water resources on a global scale. Future missions also sit on the chopping block. Venus, often described as Earth's twin because of its similar size and position in the solar system, is finally getting attention after decades of neglect. Two missions, named Da Vinci and Veritas, were meant to uncover secrets about its runaway climate and volcanic landscape. Cancelling them would slam shut windows into understanding how Earth's climate could evolve if pushed to extremes. Once timelines for planetary launches are lost, rescheduling often takes decades, meaning missed chances that today's scientists may never see return. The consequences are not only domestic. If the United States slows or cancels major science missions, other nations are ready to fill the void. China has pushed forward with lunar and planetary studies, while Europe continues strong in astrophysics with observatories of its own. Leadership in science is not a given. It moves toward the countries that keep building and operating hardware in orbit and beyond. What makes this moment even riskier is that missions could collapse while already in operation. Probes circling other planets, telescopes scanning distant galaxies, or satellites monitoring weather patterns might be powered down midstream. Current plans suggest that up to 12 Earth monitoring missions and 8 dedicated to astrophysics could be shut down. That is more than a funding dispute. It would mark the single largest loss of scientific data NASA has ever faced. And if the projects vanish, what happens next to the people who once carried them forward when the science divisions shrink to the barest minimum? What happens when decades of knowledge and skill walk out the door, not because people are ready to retire, but because the budget leaves them no choice? That's the looming reality for NASA's workforce. Staffing at the agency may soon drop to fewer than 12,000 full-time employees, a number not seen since the days right after Apollo. For an organization that now manages spacecraft across the solar system and dozens of satellites circling Earth, shrinking to that size is not just a reduction, it's a shift to survival mode. The cuts are not some distant possibility. People are already leaving. Voluntary resignations are underway as employees see the uncertainty ahead. Others are waiting for layoffs projected to sweep through more than 2,000 staff. Each position represents not just a job, but years of training, clearances, and experience. Once those people walk out, the loss isn't temporary. The country can't quickly regrow engineers who spent their careers keeping a spacecraft alive billions of miles away. There's an additional twist that shapes how this all unfolds. An executive order recently recast NASA work as part of national security efforts. That might sound protective, but the change actually limits union rights. Collective bargaining that once allowed employees to negotiate safety measures, health coverage, or workplace protections is weakened. Union offices that had operated inside facilities now face closure. Contracts that supported thousands of civil servants are dissolving. Long-time employees accustomed to negotiating benefits find they suddenly have little power to contest decisions that affect their livelihoods. The fallout inside NASA is already visible. Projects are preparing for skeleton crews, just enough staff to keep the lights on, but not enough to address the complexity of science instruments, spacecraft development, or mission operations. Building a rover, maintaining a space telescope, or preparing a sample return from Mars is not a task for 1 or 2 engineers in an empty lab. These programs demand teams who can hand off work, solve problems in real time, and support hardware that is often one of a kind. In Congress, some see this situation as a failure of leadership. One member described it as turning public servants into pawns in a political game, and that's what it feels like to many inside the agency. Men and women devoted to exploration caught between competing budget priorities. As staff numbers drop and support systems shrink, even the programs that are fully funded, like Mars sample return, could slip farther behind schedule. Yet the solution, at least in the short term, sits in surprisingly simple language. A legislative anomaly within a continuing resolution could shield NASA funding until at least November 21st, delaying deeper cuts and buying time. That single line could prevent thousands from losing jobs before the holiday season. But the real question stretches farther than November. What happens to America's place in space exploration if the nation lets its own scientific backbone erode piece by piece? NASA's future hangs on a few lines of legislative text. A continuing resolution could decide whether billions flow to science or whether missions end abruptly. That choice isn't just about budgets, it's about whether exploration survives. When telescopes close and satellites shut down, discoveries vanish before they happen. The next great picture of a distant galaxy or vital data on Earth's changing climate depends on decisions made in Washington this year. The question left is simple. Will leaders preserve the fragile backbone of NASA's work or allow short-term politics to decide the course of America's role in space? you.